So I've got some exciting news. I splurged and I bought this. So yeah, I previously mentioned that I might get pedals, but we're gonna give this a shot and see if this was gonna work for our setup. All right, so like I mentioned in my little intro there, we're going to discuss the pros and cons of the Bixpy J1 motor when used in conjunction with the Vibe Shearwater 125. My plan is to continue using the system, obviously, and then do another video maybe in like 6 months or so, updating everyone on my thoughts, maybe how they've changed in that amount of time after having put the system to use. So be sure to like and subscribe for future videos where I let you all know how the system's been working out for me. So in terms of the good things, the first point I wanted to mention is the speed. I've been reading online that some people are achieving speeds around top speeds of 4 or 5 miles an hour when they're using the Bixpy and their Vibe Shearwater 125. I haven't clocked the speed that I've gotten, but that feels right. It's really quick. And you'll see in this little clip here, I went to a lake that I'd never been to before. It's a really good sized lake. And I wanted to get from one side to the other. And when I came out of the little channel I was in where the launch was, I realized there was a lot of wind. I don't know why I didn't experience that, when I wasn't on the water, but I came around that corner, had to be like 20-mile-an-hour winds on this good sized lake. And I'm just, moving right into it with the Bixpy, and it did pretty well, but then I decided to pick up my paddle and help the motor out a little bit, and I wasn't really having to paddle all that hard, and I was just flying through it. Like it really helped cut through that chop, and I think I made it to the other side of the lake in about 10 minutes. It would have been so much harder to get to that spot, get out of that wind without that motor. So it really came in handy there. That alone almost makes it worth the purchase. All right, so the second point is the Bixpy system is really lightweight. I think it's about 10 pounds or less, and it's really easy to install. So unlike a trolling motor that you might get at a big box store, and then you have to get a battery for it, those systems can be pretty heavy and kind of big and clunky. And this thing, the entire system, the battery and the motor, all fit within the crate that I use where I keep all my tackle and stuff. So I just keep that, in my house right before a fishing trip, and I just carry it out and throw it in my truck in the morning. And it's really easy. And then once I get out, I'm loading up my kayak in the morning, it takes like 2 seconds to hook the whole thing up. So that's huge. All right, the third positive aspect of the Bixpy and the Vibe is, again, that hands-free maneuverability. In this shot here, you're going to see where there's fairly strong winds, maybe like 10-mile-an-hour winds at my back, and I really wanted to hit this spot on this lake. So I put the motor in speed 1 in reverse, and I was able to just steer with my feet and work this spot really easily. So it was almost like having spot lock, almost. It's not quite that easy. It takes some getting used to, but I caught some great fish, just having it in reverse and helping me to hold my position. So that hands-free maneuverability has just been awesome. All right, so the fourth selling point of the Bixpy and Vibe together, the Bixpy is only slightly more expensive than the Hobie 180 drive, particularly when you consider that if you want the Hobie 180 drive, everything I'm reading anecdotally online is that folks are having to get an aftermarket pod to accept the Hobie 180 because the Hobie 180 isn't really playing nice with the pod that comes with the X-Drive system that Vibe sells. So you're gonna have to get a separate pod to accept the Hobie 180 drive. So that I think it's about $100. And then I've also read that the pedal drive system, those kind of half moon latches that come on the Vibe Shearwater 125, that those have been giving out on people. So while they're pedaling, the whole thing is like popping out of the kayak. And so you gotta upgrade that too, it's my understanding. And then of course, if you're pedaling, you have to steer with your hand. To me, if I'm fishing, I want to focus mostly on fishing. It just seemed like that was one extra thing that I didn't really want to have to worry about. Then the fifth positive aspect of the Bixpy on the Vibe is the battery is really efficient. Unlike a lead acid battery or something, and I know you can get other lithium batteries for kayak motors and kayaks in general, but the one that comes with the Bixpy is really efficient. I've used it for 3 or 4 hours at a time so far, and I think I've lost about 20% of my battery. I'm also reading online other people are using it for 7 or 8 hours until the thing is dying. So The battery it comes with is great. It's really lightweight and it floats. If you happen to, go over or something and the battery lands in the water, you can at least take confidence in the fact that it's not going to sink down to the bottom of the ocean on you. All right, so here are the bad things that I've encountered using the Bixpy and the Vibe Shearwater 125. So the Vibe Shearwater 125 comes with the gravity rudder. If you have one of these things, you already know it's not that great. It doesn't really drop on its own. Certainly having the motor on there, helps it drop on its own more easily with that weight on there. But the main problem I've had with this rudder and the Bixpy on there is when I go in reverse, definitely at speeds 2 and 3, the motor wants to come up out of the water. And the problem with that is when it's doing that, you're not really moving backwards. The motor's not able to push the water or pull the water like you want it to. And it's loud. It makes a lot of noise. And if you're trying to be stealthy and sneak up on some fish, having this thing, screaming at the surface of the water is not going to help your situation. I've addressed it a little bit. I may do some more. What I did was I dremeled this spot right here on the gravity rudder, and it's helped the motor kind of sit a little bit lower in the system. I may do a little bit more of that. It's helped. The second negative thing I've run into with the Bixpy in conjunction with the Vibe is that the stock steering system that comes with the Vibe Shearwater 125 is just awful. The cabling that it comes with is kind of cheap, and the rudder, you can see right here in this photo, this part of the rudder is not really wide enough. So you have to do a modification to, add some clips or something to the rudder to kind of extend out where the cables meet the rudder. And that will enable you to get a tighter turning radius, which is important. But in my case, it's also helped the cables not dig into the little hole that the cables come out of. It was such a steep angle that the cables were at when they were coming out of that hole that it's been digging into the hoses that the cables sit inside of, and it's actually, I think, starting to dig into the kayak itself a little bit. So that's been really frustrating, and it's just made it really hard to steer. So adding these little clips have addressed that a little bit, but I'm going to have to replace the tubes. I'm also planning to add these little sort of metal stainless steel funnels to the entry points of those tubes to keep those cables from digging into the kayak. So that's been kind of annoying. When you spend this much money on a kayak and you spend this much money on a motor to propel the thing, you want to be able to steer it, and not have to worry about that. I don't really, what's the point in dropping all this money on a system that's not enjoyable or to steer, or is actually causing damage to your kayak just to steer it. So I wish that Vibe would have designed a better steering system for the rudder. You can modify it. There's a workaround for that, but again, I don't think I should have to do that, or you should have to do that as well. All right, so the third negative here with the Bixpy, and this is a Bixpy thing primarily, is there's these little twist lock connectors on the cable that meets the battery and the motor. And in my opinion, they're textured, but they're textured on the wrong side. So it's really difficult, particularly on the battery side, to know with confidence that the cable is locked in place in a way that it's going to prevent water from getting into that connection. And that's really important because the instructions tell you that if water does get in there, it could destroy the battery, could destroy the motor. So you really need to keep that connection dry. And it's hard to get your fingers, there's not a lot of clearance in there to know with confidence, again, that this thing's like really well connected and it's not going to get destroyed. Kayaking, it gets wet, right? Like we all know that in a kayak, you're not going to keep water from getting inside your kayak pretty much on any trip. So I do wish that Bixpy would come out with a new cable where just that texture is on the other side, or that twist lock is like a little bit bigger, so you're not struggling to get that thing seated in there properly. The fourth negative that I run into, and you could run into this with any motor, is that weeds are a problem. So if you have like a Hobie style pedal drive with fins on it, my understanding is that those push grasses away, whereas the Bixpy just sucks them right up and gets it all tangled up in the propeller. I've been able to, pull the thing up, and while I'm on the water, rip those weeds out for the most part. And there is a guard that you can put on the motor to prevent it from getting clogged up with weeds. But just know with a motor, that's a thing you're gonna have to contend with. All right, so the fifth and final negative when you motorize a kayak is you're gonna most likely have to register the thing. Now, I know this varies from state to state. I'm in Florida, and it cost me $130 to register my kayak in Florida since I put the Bixpy on it. I know some people, they'll just say, oh, just chance it. That's not something I really feel like dealing with. I don't, when I'm on the water, I don't want the fuzz, giving me a hard time or having any reason to write me a ticket when I'm out there. I can, it's bad enough if you're having a bad day and you're getting skunked and then you get handed a ticket. That would totally be my luck. I'm not interested in that. But I'll pay the fee and move on with my life. Not a big deal. All right, so overall, I am happy with this purchase so far. I think that the pros definitely outweigh the cons for me. And any of these negatives that I mentioned, by and large, they can be fixed. It's absolutely not a deal breaker. If you're considering this kayak, if you're considering the Bixpy motor, my hope is that this information was helpful to you so you know what to expect once you get this thing. You want to enjoy your time on the water. You spend a lot of money on this stuff. And you just want to have fun. You want to be able to catch fish, be efficient. If you're competing in tournaments, you want to be competitive. My plan is to do a 6-month update where I can let all of you know how the system has been working out for me. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.